Hi, my name is Ross Richie, and I am the CEO and founder of Boom Studios. You might know us from Something is Killing the Children, Once and Future, Seven Secrets, and We Only Find Them When They're Dead, or Mighty Morphin Power Rangers and Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Lumberjanes, and Mouse Guard. So my guest today is Kieron Gillen, one of the hottest writers in comics. You would know him from hit series from Image Comics like The Wicked and the Divine, as well as Die, and Once and Future from Boom Studios. And he's the Kid Loki guy from Marvel, worked on Uncanny X-Men as well as Young Avengers. And today is part 3 of a 3-part interview. It's the final hour of our 3-hour talk. I'm super excited. I love Kieron. He's amazing. I think you're going to see a bunch of really cool things in this interview. I hope that you learn a lot. Remember to subscribe and to hit the bell to make sure that you get notified when there is more content that's uploaded. I've got some great upcoming guests you're going to get a big kick out of. And make sure that you hit like and comment on this video so that others can see it and check it out, and you can let me know what you like about the video and what you don't. So without any further ado, thank you so much. Here is Kieron Gillen.
I mean, like, I don't do it anymore, but like for this, you know, that kind of the period when I was photocopying and doing my zine stuff and all that, like, my partner at the time, she was driven to distraction by the fact she could hear me visibly counting panels.
Wow.
Like the fact, you know, when I was reading, because I broke apart every comic I read basically in terms of, and I still do it now. When I read a comic and it feels long or short,
wow.
Like if I'm like, this feels like, was this only 22 pages? And then I count the pages, and I go back, okay, why does that feel long? Then I count the panels, and like, you know, try to get that kind of, you know, I still just go to the first tactics of like, okay, how the hell did that make? Why did that work like that? What can we, you know, what is usable there?
That's amazing. So okay, so you have this moment with Phonogram where you break through, and then what?
It's weird. I said like, I occasionally think about when talking to people in the movie industry. I describe Phonogram as basically like our pie. You know what I mean? Like this cool black and white movie which got our name out. And the problem with like Phonogram, which I have nothing but love for, it doesn't really, if you're aiming at a career, it doesn't really say you do anything than Phonogram. You know,
interesting.
You know what I mean? Like,
it's so personal. It's hard to figure out.
It's like, well done, you can do about pop music. This does not necessarily mean you can write, you know, Spider-Man or whatever, which is true, you know. And also, I mean, this is actually the bit where it's quite, let me work out to say this. So the book's out there, and there's a lot of people who are aware of the book. And there's definitely some type of conversations I have with people, like Shelley Bond at Vertigo. I end up talking to quite a bit. And so I'm starting to pitch at people.
Shelley's amazing, very, very important figure in the history of comics.
Yeah, another Anglophile. This is kind of like, you know, the Anglophiles are useful for me, of course.
Okay.
Like, actually, as a way around it, I've got to talk about like Warren Ellis, who recommended me to Avatar, who it took me a while for the work for Avatar to come out, but that was some of my earliest work for hire, like circa 2008.
And which Avatar series was that?
This was Uber. I started writing Uber, and it didn't come out till it took that long to come out.
Wow.
Yeah. Which is like, it was actually the second superhero comic I'd ever written, I think. And the
That's
first
incredible.
being New Universal 1959, which was a spin-off of the New Universal comic that Ellis was doing at the time. That like he'd picked various writers to do spin-offs, and I did this. It's basically a James Ellroy superhero story in the 1950s.
Wow.
Like, and it's only one issue, and I hit the, you know, I love James Ellroy. So I really try to hit that sort of vibe, and it's all like conspiracy. It's all like conspiracy stuff, and it's got some cool moments when really creepy superhero stuff happens. And that is the moment I think most things changed at Marvel, in that they saw this issue and it's like, oh, this guy can write a superhero comic. So Robin Simons from the 4 office and Nick Lowe from the X-Men office both dropped me a line. They both dropped me a line at the same time, and I think I thought they were the same person, because I presumed that, no, why would 2 Marvel editors be? In fact, I'm lying. I think they thought they were my original editor. I failed to realize that why would be 3 editors talking to me?
Wow.
Yeah. So they offered me, and this, of course, I mentioned right at the beginning of this story about the first hit comic. Put it online. Other artists said, "Oh, we should do something sometime."
Yep.
That's basically, you can trace that all the way through my career. It's like playing a slot machine or something. Like gamble or quit.
Yep.
Like getting the previous work leads to, oh, that was interesting. We should do something. Right. And that kind of the 1959 led to these first like stories for, like, it was a Dazzler thing, an 8-page Dazzler thing for Nick, and a one-off Beta Ray Bill story, I think, for Warren. And I wrote them both, didn't fluff them. Then they offered me another one, like, do you want to do a mini, and then, or like a one-off Sabretooth thing, Sabretooth thing, and a one-off a free issue mini for Beta Ray Bill. And I did them. They didn't hate them. And then an Aries, and then it was heading towards Sword, I think. You know what I mean? So it's like, it was always like, okay, try this. Oh, that was good. Try this.
Right.
And that's how the reputation built. And of course, also tied to this is years of being a journalist has made me really reliable. Like,
well, I was going to bring that up because I think that's incredibly important. One of the things, my own experience, I worked at Malibu Comics in the early 90s in the marketing department. And a buddy of mine that I just met at the comic shop and got to know was Tommy Lee Edwards, incredibly talented artist, wonderful person.
I love his stuff.
And Tommy was trying to break in, and he had just been published in an independent anthology. And I'm probably 23, 24. And I say to Tommy, Tommy, Tommy's talent was clear as a belt to me. And I said, Tommy, I think you've got it. But one thing I just want to tell you, and I was trying to show his work to the Malibu editors at the time. I said, I know these editors, the single most important thing to them is that you turn the pages in. Well, at that time, it was a page a day. If you can do a page a day, that's the most important thing. And I remember Tommy kind of cocked his head and looked at me and was like, is that, he said, asked some version of, is that second to quality? Because he was working so hard to every day improve. And I said, yeah, I think so. Like they would rather have the story than have the story 3 days late better. And I remember Tommy having that moment of like, oh, wow, I didn't expect that. I would expect that they would let me hold on to it and work on it and make it even better so that when it gets published, it's better, and sort of the commercial reality of understanding how to turn your work in on a deadline, crucial.
I think it's one of these, especially for writers. I mean, I've had Alan Moore said, but Alan Moore's definitely said the idea that your fundamental duty is to make sure the artist has pages to draw, because the artist can't pay their rent. I think it was Ivan Brandon who told me. Of course, I agree with him. Let's say I agree with him. If the artist doesn't have a script, you should pay their rent. Because like you are literally the problem. So like, and also my basic Catholic guilt means that's a good motivator for me, knowing that no one else can work until I do something. Like that's a pretty good one. Also, like when I worked in an office at PC Gamer, I think people who haven't worked in a publishing in-house at publishing often think, oh, it doesn't go to press yet, it doesn't matter if I get it late. Or like in the case of a magazine, you need, if someone has a monthly column, they say, oh, the magazine doesn't go to press until then, I can hand it in then. No, we want you to hand it in the first week, so the artist has so the art design people have something to do in that week. They've got enough shit to do later on because they've got them, that's just the nature of like flow and copy and impact. So yeah, I mean, like coming from that background makes me, I hope, I'm saying this, I imagine every single editor I've ever worked with going, Kieron is delusional. But I try to be like, I don't think I'm as quick as I used to be, but I'm still kind of, when I was working for Marvel, I was always expressly doing less than I could do. I don't think I've ever worked to my full rate at any point. Like, because that's when you break. And so it's one of the things, I never did it then, but now I never schedule to work at the weekend. And the reason why is because that if something goes wrong, and stuff goes wrong regularly, I can work at the weekend.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yep. I've always got to give. And like, and suppose quite regularly, my editors at Marvel stopped giving me deadlines because like I always kind of knew when. Then I knew like since I'm following the story, I know when a script is needed. So it's like
that's powerful.
It's like it's so funny because like I think people from magazines thought I was quite prima donna-y, and they were right. But like for a comic creator, I'm very low maintenance. Like I'm not like there's people who are on the phone every day and all that. I do the pages, they get in. Just I think I'm slightly worse than I used to be. Yeah. But at the same time, I'm pretty chill-ish.
But I think that's your 20s. Is it's like you? I mean, when you're paying for university, with the work that you're doing, that has tremendous value, right? And you're accepting in that publishing culture. You have a framework that you're working in, and certainly having moments where you're on staff and you're part of editorial, it gives you an appreciation for people turning their material in.
Oh, definitely. It's all there's the wide skill set I've come to, as in like it's all writing. Like the majority of my work I've done is writing, but there's definitely like all these different strands. They've kind of the synthesis is interesting for me. I remember chatting with my friend Lee Alexander, who's like an amazing. She mainly writes for games now, as in like, but narrative designer. One thing she said to me, which led to sort of Die, was about the Wicked issue was the magazine issue, which was. It was a way Kevin Wadder does all the main art. We had to find a way. Okay, how can we do a Kevin Wadder issue? I know. Okay, magazine. They're the illustrations. We'll write articles. Then I realized, wait a sec. I'll get like real journalists we know to write the articles, as in like proper newspaper journalists. And then I'll pretend to be the characters online in a chat with the journalist to get a transcript, and they will write up the story, and then we'll lay it in the magazine. Oh, we need an editorial. We need like this, this, and this. You know what I mean? To do that, I would have to be a magazine person, know about art design, know journalists. Also, can role play online, which of course I learned from when I was on the mushes back at university. Remember?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of skills there, and that is quite unusual. But at the same time, that is some of my most quote unquote interesting work. You know what I mean? So like as I go forward, I'm mostly interested in trying to find, okay, what do you do that other people can less do? And not because it's better, but because it's more because if I don't do it, no one will.
Right. But from the audience perspective, it's like the bad example is, do you really need another Spider-Man comic that's just a Spider-Man comic? And the truth of the matter is the publisher wants another Spider-Man comic, right? So, and that's no knock on Marvel. It's just a publisher's perspective. Take it from a publisher. It's like, we need to put the product out because otherwise I'm going to have to let people go. And that sucks. But artistically, the audience wants something different. And sometimes they don't even know it. And so
it's definitely like, there's all those different urges together. And I think like what I'm talking about there is definitely, this is my, I'm about to say, I hate myself for saying this, Ross. It's about my own creative journey. You know what I mean? Like, I
think that's really important.
Yeah, I know it absolutely is. Being British and of working class backgrounds, I want to kill myself as I said that, but at the same time, that is 100% what it is. Yeah. And like, I think there's a quote. This goes back to journalism. There was a story I read about. It was a Nobel Prize winning physicist, I think. Someone will correct me, I'm sure. And he regularly got asked, how do you know if you're going to do Nobel Prize winning work? And his answer was, okay, you have to ask yourself two questions. One, what is the most important question facing your field? Two, are you working on it?
Yeah.
And that's wonderful, clear. But as a journalist, me and the editor of PC Gamer, after I'd gone freelance, we used to quote it at each other. And it was always, because the important thing for a journalist or a critic was, what do you think the most important question is? Not what we go for, you know what I mean? And then it was always like a dare to each other. Okay, give us something cool. What's the next big thing? And like for any creative, the question of, okay, what's the important thing? What do you want to do, really? And like if you get your eyes focused on, okay, what is the most important thing you could be doing? If you have that choice, because there's always an if.
Yep.
You should take that choice. Still.
Well, I think that's important because it's like you can't hit what you're not aiming at. Right? So it's like basically what you're asking each other is, what are you aiming at?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so and I think that's super important. Okay, so let's do Marvel. And I know that like there's so many people going, when are we going to get to WicDiv? When are we going to get to WicDiv? And so
we're over 2 hours into this.
I know,
like,
I'm having so much fun. I'm having so much fun. But what's great is we have as much time as we want, which I don't want to presume that you want to spend all this time. So anytime that you're done, just let me know. But I'm having a blast. So so let's talk about Marvel, because that's huge, right? So you go through. I'll let you take through the different sort of seasons.
Yeah. I'm going to take it slightly quick because I do need to eat at some point.
Okay.
But as I said, so I've sort of like leveled up through Marvel. So I've got to the point where I'm starting to do like my first, launching books. Like Sword, I think, was my first ongoing. Yeah, yep. It was, and it was cancelled by issue 5. But it was one of those kind of, I think me and Steve, we had like a list of like, I think over 10 reasons why it would be cancelled. Like reasons why this book is doomed. Like, and we were right, but that was one of those kind of like, I planned for that would be a useful way of putting it. As in, like, I say this often, I planned for success, but I also planned for failure. Like, yep. I knew where that book was going, but I also designed it to be, if this ends at issue 5, which I think it will,
yep,
it's a cool ending. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So I often like, and at Marvel, being aware of the realities of the market, I was often thinking about telescoping. Mm-hmm. The idea of like, if this goes well, we go like this.
Yep.
If it goes poorly, we go like this. And Smart. Especially because when you're working at Marvel, especially in that period, mm-hmm. there were so many crossovers. Mm-hmm. You were aware, like, you could plot a course, and it's like, can you really trust you're going to be able to plot that course? No, you have to plot a slightly different thing. So that was so much of what I learned there. I think the apex of that was like Journey into Mystery, the Loki book I did.
Yep. Huge.
Where when I was plotting that, I knew it was coming into a crossover, and I actually plotted it to aggressively take over any crossover it came into contact with. It was like one of those little animals who take, one of those little insects who drills a hole in your head and tries to control you. You know what I mean? And that's kind of the meta nature of like writing in a big 2 universe, which taught me a lot about time. It was a great way to push myself as a writer in lots of ways. And it was like, I thought it was interesting. I highly enjoyed my time at Marvel. I definitely, and I think by the time at the end of it, I was burnt out and wanted to leave, and I did. That's the other thing. I can tell if I'm getting bored. Yep. And that's the thing. That's why I left games journalism. That's why, like, I'm quite conscious that saying, I'm close to not wanting to do this anymore. I need to change up. So when I finished at Marvel with like Angela was one of the last books I did. And I could tell this is quite hard for me to write this. And then I started doing Star Wars at the same time, and Star Wars was so freeing. I realized, really get out. Because this is so much more fun. But to go earlier at Marvel, it was like, I view my time at Marvel like, I felt like a supporting actor, and not in a bad way, like in a quite a good way. In that I was, there were big crossovers, which I never wrote. And I wrote big books, but they, like, I'm smiling. How much of this story can I tell? My big break at Marvel, and I think the thing that set the tone for me being a really good supporting and like almost like a Mr. Wolf problem solver, like which is egotist, like Pulp Fiction. The idea if something was a problem, I might be able to handle it. I took over 4 after JMS left.
Yes.
Which, like, people can Google. There's all manner of stuff there, but basically did involve me having to take over this book, and I had no idea how it was going to end. So, and then I had 3 issues to get 4 and all the Asgardians back to America. They were presently in Latvia with Doctor Doom. Yep. I had to basically make Loki be trusted by the Asgardians again. And the last thing we'd seen was him dissecting a bunch of fellow Asgardians with Doctor Doom, and the Asgardians know about it.
Wow.
I had to have 4 involved. 4 wasn't involved in this plot. He was off in America doing his own thing. And there's something else as well. And I had no idea how JMS was going to end this final issue. So I sort of sat there and I plotted. I read his run incredibly intensely and looked at the sort of stuff that was just left floating. And thought, okay, how can he end it?
Yep.
So I tried to, as a writer, reverse engineer what he could possibly do. And it was like chess. Like, So when I got the final script, I went through it, and actually, God bless him, he chose actually, because there were certain things, if he did, I would have been completely screwed. Like, I didn't think he was going to do them, but there were definitely things that were foreshadowed. So,
Wow.
you know.
Wow.
And then my basic solution was, okay, Loki has to save somebody, because otherwise, why would they trust him? They've set up a thing a few issues earlier where Doctor Doom is vivisecting an Asgardian. Look, the heart will beat for X number of minutes after it's left the body. Something like that. And I go, great. That, as a writer, for me, that says I'm going to tear a heart out of a body, then stick it in again.
Yep.
So I knew I was going to murder an Asgardian in my first scene, and then by tearing their heart out, and then Loki brings the heart back, and the only question became, who's that going to be?
Yep.
So it was depending how JMS left it, I would take it in any direction. I just needed somebody to die, and he ended up with Kelda, who was the Storm romance interest character, going off to try to kill Doctor Doom, and it was like, all right then, it's you, Kelda. So both 3 issues, I got it all tied together. Then back for the Siege, which is the present big crossover. That was meant to be 2 issues, became 3 issues, then became 4 issues, then became another 4 issues and 2 tie-ins to that.
Wow.
And then when all this is expanded issue by issue. So I have no idea, like, do you want to do this? And I go, yeah. And then when it's all over, my editor phones up and say, hey, Kieron, do you want to do another 4 issues? And I just find both of us are laughing at each other. And like, so I end up doing like a 13-issue run, essentially.
Yep. Piece by piece.
Yeah, and it reads well. You know, that's the thing. It's like it reviewed well, it sold well, which is probably more important.
Yep.
And like, which clearly was a disaster situation. I mean, it could have gone so badly wrong in any number of ways. Like I turned it into good, acceptable comics. And I think that kind of like, for me, that's what I did at most of my first time at Marvel, was like, I was put into difficult situations and I loved finding solutions. You know?
Well, I think that's an important sort of framework as a professional, which is, you know, a career is generally a series of obstacles presented. And you've got to look at these obstacles and you have to say, what's the opportunity? You know, and the other thing I want to call out is sort of like your formalist mind and approach, structured, but you don't become didactic and get stuck in that. And what you do is you sit there and build in flexibility. And I think that that's the hallmark. Like when you can have structure and flexibility, like I actively talk about this a lot at Boom, in the marketing as well as the editorial, having the structure of knowing where you're going and what you're going to do, and then having the ability to recognize the terrain that you're in and adapt professionally is incredibly powerful. Because I really think those are the 2 gears that the world lives in.
It's really useful. I mean, like, especially like it's with the chaos of something like Marvel when you've got this big multi-connected universe. I mean, there's all manner of stories you can tell, because it's there's nothing I quite like being outside a pub on Friday night and shouting down corrections down a phone because something's gone wrong, and it all turns out fine. You know, like it's an adventure. And I've done all these sort of books. Like my Avatar books are starting to come out. The other thing that happened at Marvel was they went to like 3-month double shipping, basically. And that was the reason. And it basically was like a 5-year hole in my creator-owned work, because I planned to do 3 books at Marvel, basically, which is quite a lot. And suddenly those 3 books have become 6 books.
Woo!
You know what I mean? Or 5 or 6. And I'm like, oh, right, okay, crunch. And even, you know, I said that even that, as I said earlier, I was still not at my limit. You know what I mean? You know, like it was 18 issues a year, so it's basically 5 books. And this is doable, you know, especially because, you know, I'm a decade younger than. But this is like adventure. We're doing all these books. But I am getting like, okay, this has been really fun doing supporting stuff. But like, to be the sort of writer I want to be, I need to like clear a space and swing for something. And that's kind of like where, partially, that's where Journey to Mystery came from. Like Journey to Mystery was kind of me thinking, okay, let's see if I can do like a book potentially for me. Like this is basically a pop Vertigo book at Marvel. And I was always aware that was a model I still occasionally apply to my career. I'm like, okay, I basically do 2 books at once. One which is the the pop book that proves I'm not an effing weirdo, and then there's the utter weird book which does prove, oh no, he is a weirdo. You know what I mean? They're the two work for hire books I've at any one time. And Uncanny X-Men was the hello, I'm playing the main stage of Glastonbury. This is pop. I can do a superhero book and it's fine, even though occasionally you get an I did an entire episode about Dostoevsky. Why would I do that? And then you get
because Dostoevsky's amazing.
He's amazing. That was like it was the issue with Dustin Weaver art as well. Honestly, it's one of my
wow.
So good. Dustin Weaver's amazing. I love him.
He's incredible and a wonderful person.
Yeah. And Journey's Mystery, which is very much more okay, I'm going to do something a bit more like it's a pop gaming story basically.
Yeah.
And finding the rhythm between those two led to me. Okay, I want to do something absolutely hermetically sealed, and that was led to Young Avengers. So people asked me to do Young Avengers. I had to be talked into it a bit because it felt a bit too obvious in some ways. And also, what's the other one? I guess it's also the fact that the original Young Avengers run was so great, but it was such a classic superhero story. And there's no way I would do that, you know. So I was like, they were looking for hostile. They were looking for like an interesting hostile takeover, like a real reimagining. So the idea was, okay, let's do a book like, let's treat this book like we own it. Like let's pretend that Young Avengers, let's pretend that Young Avengers is actually Phonogram 4 or something, you know.
Wow.
So like so much of what that book was, can you do a pop book at Marvel? And the answer is, no, not really. But you know, you could do something that has a lot of energy. You know what I mean? Like people really responded to that book in a way which, I mean, it was a medium seller, but like it sold, but it got very good reviews, and very clearly set up for Wicked Divine. So it's kind of like halfway through Young Avengers, I had the idea of that was the year my dad died, unfortunately, which gave the inspiration for Wick Div. And I sent this mail to Jamie halfway through saying, this is it. So I told him about Wick Div, because the plan was to actually go and do Phonogram afterwards.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. Okay.
But at the moment, like, well, there were two reasons. One of it was like, Young Avengers is about the future. You know, it's about doing new things. Us going immediately doing the old thing betrays that. Two, Phonogram never sells. It's like, it will never sell. We've got literally eyes on us for the first time in our entire career. Let's try to do something that isn't stupid.
Capitalize on it.
And this is like, because it was the thing we never got to do. I always remember like me and Rick Remender in a car talking about Phonogram and Fear Agent being defeated by comics. The idea we're trying to do ongoing books, and it's like, you know, Phonogram succumbed to comics after 13 issues. It's survived by Kieron Gillen and Jamie McKelvey. You know, we were a generation of writers who never got to do her ongoing books. The exception being Jason Aaron. Aaron, actually, obviously Kirkman, but that's slightly different. And Brian K. Vaughan. But like that kind of, these writers are very clearly informed by that 90s Vertigo stuff.
Yes.
And we have the idea of that 50, 60, 70 issue run as our thing. That's what counts as being a creator for us. And we never got to do it. So in that moment with Wick Div and the end of Young Avengers, we realized this is our best chance to try to launch a book that does well enough to do that. This is our one shot to go all M&M for a second. And that was always the thing. It's like, okay, let's go for it. And Wick Div was very explicitly this. I mean, a few years earlier, I made the joke that we should relaunch Phonogram and like Ultimate Phonogram and do it with like all the very pretentious stuff we'll take out and we'll just do it direct and emotional. And to some degree, Wick Div is a bit Ultimate Phonogram, as in it's kind of like Phonogram with the specificity removed and a lot of other stuff plugged in. And obviously the formalisms is took way up. And it's like, you know, Wick Div's like this 5-year journey into, it's like a degree course in some ways, as it starts you here and then takes you across what is clearly a planned 5 years. And it's me and Jamie, you know, we spent like 11 years before we got to do that book. But it's that kind of like, here's this big statement of like, okay, this is how we think a monthly comic and comics could act. And we did, you know, we, especially after working in house at like Marvel, the complete control was very important to us. So in that position, like, can we pull it off? And then,
well, you're in this highly structured environment where you're not calling the shots, it's being delivered to you, right? Here's the problem, solve it. Here's the problem, solve it. We need, I can order one more, I can order one more. Okay, I'll order 3 more. And you're functioning within that framework, and then getting out. And this might go back to, and this will get a little controversial. This goes back to, the Catholic school kid, right? Where it's like structure, structure, structure. And then you're like, freedom, like I get to call my own shots. Don't tell me what to do. I'm going to go do my own thing. I mean, it's massively liberating. And then I think one of the brilliant, I'll be a publisher for a second. One of the brilliant things that I think about not doing Phonogram at that moment is that what it does is it deputizes the Phonogram fans, right? Because they get to be the messengers for Wick Div. Right? Because idiomatically, it's an urban book. I would go so far as to say urbane urban book, if I can say that. And then supernatural, right? So you have all of the stacking of, so sort of the people that love Phonogram can go out and be your emissaries because they know what's coming, right? And there's very few commercial moments where you see sort of Phonogram is Phonogram and Wick Div is Wick Div. And they're very different books, but there's enough similarities, and the gap in between sort of builds up the thirst, right? And you're in this zone where you're building up your commercial name through Marvel, and it creates this really unique moment that can catapult you. And you had done the work, you and Jamie, of course. Jamie's brilliant, genius. And so that moment really, I think, conspires where it all comes together. And, now we've previously been talking a lot about Kismet, and I think this is more than that, right? Because it's like you've done the work, and you have fed the audience through Phonogram, and that audience is starved. And there's this, I'm going to keep quoting Malcolm Gladwell, but it's like the tipping point in one of his earliest books of like, you have these evangelists that are in the zone, and they're in the shops, and many of them are the store owners that are sitting there doing the hand sell, telling people, you need to get on this. And of course, you have this tremendous, phenomenal moment with Eric Stevenson brilliantly creating the New Image Renaissance. And so you've got all these allies in this space with Brian K. Vaughan and, all the energy. And of course, Walking Dead is bigger than God, and it's like, what a tremendous moment, so it's really incredible. And then of course, the way that y'all deliver, it's just staggeringly one of the best comic books of the past, 20, 30 years, easy, hands down.
Thank you.
Yeah,
honestly,
absolutely.
like that means a lot. Honestly, like it was, you said like the kismet of it, as in that me and Jamie were hyper aware this is a shot. Like we've been in comics for a while, and like this is a chance to do that thing we want to do. Like as you mentioned, the Phonogram, like that level of cred. There's there's also the idea that like people are more likely to jump over it. In indie comics. It's like a new volume of Phonogram will probably be ordered like an old volume of Phonogram, but like a new book by the same team, people are more likely to try. As in the Phonogram readers will, but also the people who've heard of Phonogram will go, oh, well, I've heard about that. Let's try it.
Yep.
And also with the Young Avengers, the fact we basically went straight from Young Avengers to, in fact, we announced Wick Div the day after Young Avengers ended.
Wow.
So like a lot of the readers came up. As far as I can see, there's a kind of like, I mean, there's an element of Wick Div which is HBO Young Avengers. You know what I mean?
What a great pitch! That's awesome.
But like, you know what I mean? Like, there was a lot of things going. We're very aware that this is our chance to do a book. And when the orders came in for issue 1, which were good, they were like, I think they were 55.
Wow.
Like, I was in the South Bank Centre in London, and I just screamed. My wife had gone into. My wife was working in the poetry library then, and she'd just gone into work, and I ran and get her. We're having a party tonight, and we immediately threw the party. And that moment, it was really nice because after so long, that's a genuine hit. But also the moment when we have previously our creator owned work was based around the how can we keep this book going? As in, how can we earn enough money to like pay our rent, not have to concentrate?
Yep.
And suddenly the problem flipped. It became how can we not fuck this up?
Yep.
The idea is like because now it's about blowing it, and there's all many people across history who've blown it when now it's ours to lose, and we like kill. I remember Jamie sent me the mail like when issue 1 came out. It was like, are you worried we're killing off the most popular character in issue 5? And I went, yes, I'm very worried.
Well, that's kind of I know from the Boom lens, that's something I'm always worried about, which is, are we oversold? because you have that moment when like you just kill yourself to sell, and then they buy, and then you go, uh-oh, is everyone gonna be in, or are they gonna sit there and go, huh? You really sold this to me, and it's not exactly what I was picturing, which is it's so different in comics, where it's like there's so much of anticipation on what a thing's going to be before you buy it. And you have so many pictures in your head, but to stick that landing, it's exactly the right moment professionally to pivot. I think another thing to call out is in the skill set here is paying attention. And I think that's super important. And the reason I say that, it might sound obvious, but I know a lot of professionals that you get busy, and you're married and you have a kid or whatever, or you've got, you're playing in your band, fill in the blank of, people have lives. And your picture of what the market is gets frozen 5 years ago or 10 years ago, when you were really paying attention to everything. And the market's constantly changing and constantly moving, and you have to update that picture of what it is. And you have to stay current, and sort of having that moment where you go, we made it, but bad news, we've made it, right? Yes. And so like, we got to pay attention. We got to make sure, we're killing a major character in issue 5. It might be the absolute wrong thing to do, so.
All the way through, it's like, it was such a journey. I think it's one of the things, like, okay, how to phrase this? Like, we're aware of, like, it was a big book, we had to try on it, but we really pushed it. We pushed it very hard. Like, we're very happy to see people saying it was overhyped, because my math is always like, it's always a bell curve. So like, someone who's seen a lot of the thing thinks it's overhyped. That means you're getting most of the people the right amount of hype. Yep. But at the same time, it was a book we put a lot of work into. Yep. It's this kind of like, we're aware there's a big chance, so we aim big. And occasionally I get a feeling that sometimes when people have a chance, they don't necessarily go for their biggest book, kind of like, they always play it safe, I guess.
Yep.
I don't know. I think that's a bit harsh, actually, now I think about it.
Well, I would feather this in, is I think what you're not recognizing as a talent that you have is your ability to recognize what your strength is. And there's a lot of folks that don't know what their strength is. And it's not for lack of trying. They just can't see it. They're in the forest, they can't see the trees. And so a lot of times I'll see creators go for something, you'll see a creator who needs to get back to basics go too far, right? Because they just can't recognize that they need to go back to basics. Or, they misjudge the moment. They go back to phonogram instead of going forward to WIC div. And it's because they just love phonogram so much, and they're being led by their heart, and they're not analyzing what's going on. So, it's a real mixed bag, but I think that moment of being able to understand what the moment is, and, the moment arrives, and then stay engaged and be motivated and be on top of the situation, and think critically about where are your risks and how are you navigating those risks and how are you dealing with it, and that married to your ability to have a plan, that it's huge.
It was a life-changing book in every single way. Like, and it's like, obviously Sex Criminals just ended this week. So it's like, yes. It feels obviously our love rivals, or and that wave of image books. And I'm still sort of thinking about how I feel about that wave sort of ending now, really.
Yeah.
And it's a lot, what I mean? Like, obviously Sex Criminals had this enormous, like, and Bitch Planet as well had these kind of social groups around it, and WIC div had their lovely intense fans. We've had more cosplay, the mobs of cosplayers we had, which was a joy.
Yes.
And I think about like the people, because it was also like, it was almost like a fantasy of how we wanted comics to work. I imagine, like, I had it was Michael, wasn't it? A writer told me at we have parties. So the WIC div, one of the WIC div parties we had in Seattle, and I think this is one of the best. It was like this enormous chapel-like building. The music was there, it was blaring, a load of people in cosplay. It's an enormously queer heaving dance floor. There are people in the cubicles who have to be thrown out because they're having sex. This kind of like, and he says to me, when Grant Morrison wrote about the Invisibles, he was kind of he was hoping that, that's the fantasy really of this kind of like this world
scene,
of these people.
This audience.
Yeah. and this and Wicked very clearly influenced by the Invisibles, like amongst many other things. But like the first page is Invisibles homage, and like Wicked is the one that managed to actually turn the idea of what a comics party could look like into reality. You know what I mean? And, and the joyous thing, there's so many people that it wasn't just like club kids. The idea like people used Wicked and found it a safe place to be themselves. And
well articulated.
And it was so like people who've never really understood dancing before enjoyed dancing. You know what I mean? Like, it's so easy to just. I'd say it's so easy to talk about Wicked as like a very successful comic book, and I say I'm very happy to talk about that. But the idea of doing something which is like culturally relevant and like part of many people's like adolescence. There's like there's so many readers. Like there's part of my head that I had the fantasy of like someone's reading Young Avengers at 16. At 17, or like 17, 16, 17. At 18, they start reading Wicked. When Wicked finishes, they'll be 23. This is basically their degree course. The idea this is a book that's going to grow with them across this period of their lives and ends up with this weirdly, and then go forth into adulthood, I guess. Yeah. Honestly, the book meant the world to me. I really can't believe I got to do that.
Yeah, you have so much to be so proud of, you and Jamie, and to go to that, like I was one of those readers. Like dance has never been something I've had any predilection for, and reading about you writing about dancing is one of the things really lodged in my mind, and I think also sort of the culture that exists now, the culture that you and I grew up with, being a nerd, or being sort of interested in these subjects. I don't attribute any negativity to the term nerd.
No,
but some people do, and so sort of like understanding, especially that vision that Grant has in the 90s of like what the culture could be, and marrying these subcultures together. When you talk about creating the safe space, a zone where people are understood and are encouraged to be who they are, I think it's very, very powerful. And I remember sort of at shows you putting these parties on, and how incredibly important they were. And that's all. When the book extends into the real world, it's a moment. Take it from the publisher of Lumberjanes. When the book goes out into the real world, it's quite incredible to see it do its thing. So congrats, man. It's gigantic. So let's see. So now we go past Wicked, and let's talk about Die. Or if you have time.
Probably best to wrap it off on the hour, I reckon.
All right, you got it.
But basically when Wicked, basically about halfway through Wicked, not even halfway through Wicked, when Wicked was a success, and I realized, and the maps appeared, okay, I reckon we're gonna be able to do it. I was just thinking then is, what would I have done if Wicked was only like we couldn't reach the end? You know what I mean?
Right.
I said about telescoping earlier. I'm not. If I ever had a plan for Wicked failing, I don't remember it.
Yeah.
And that's a rarity. In the case of about halfway through, I started thinking, okay, what kind of writer did you want to be? This is because Wicked was explicitly written to be the end of a stage of my life. Like it's the end of my whatever counted as youth is over. It was the book about. I started writing it when I was 38. I knew it'd be over like about 43. And of course, the character's having 2 years to live. That's clearly me being 38 looking at 40. That's it's not even subtle. And it's like, okay, that stage of my life, whatever it is over. And of course, I came away with two things. A part of me was like, I'm always want to do something I haven't done before. I wanted to be, I'm flirting with writing for different media. That's that's part of it. Okay, look at bigger stages. Think about that. And the other stages, go weirder. You know what I mean? Like that's the other side. As in, like, it's the two poles are Robert Kirkman and Alan Moore. Like biggest person on the planet, or I want to live in a house in Northampton and talk to my God.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, those are two ways to think about art. And of course, I have a tendency towards dichotomies, which is bad. That's actually one of my weaknesses. But so just thinking that space, so what do you want to do? And at least some of it is actually, my answer was kind of just flirt with both. So in the case of Die, it's like, I want to write something more complicated than Wicked. I want to write something shorter about Wicked. I want to write something more about characters at least as old as I am. I've got a basic rule at the moment. I'm not writing teenagers for years. Like, and if I ever that kind of like, I somehow wrote teenagers for like about a decade, and I never, you know, I never planned that.
Wow.
It was like, I mean, Phonogram is mainly about 20 and for 20 somethings about to turn 30. There's like some teenagers in the second volume, but like people tend to count pop culture as teenage, but whatever.
Yeah.
And then Generation Hope, they offered me that book. Great, I'll write it. Kid Loki. I didn't turn Loki into a kid. I pitched an Elric book basically.
Oh God, that would have been amazing. What you did was amazing, but that
actually
love
what Al Ewing ended up doing with Agents of Asgard was a little bit like what I was talking about. You know what I mean? Like sexy kind of like that kind of Loki. So Kid Loki leads the Young Avengers. Young Avengers, we're not stupid. We've got to do a book that connects to it. Yep. So suddenly we're writing teenagers for number 5. So that, you know what I mean? Like the flow, but that was never the plan. I mean, like the thing about Phonogram is it was always about like loving of music. My dad left me a mixtape when he died.
Wow.
With like and also with notes about the songs, why he picked them.
Oh my God. Wow.
And that's the Phonogram story. You know what I mean? Like, it's always about what does music mean to people, you know, like, and that's just, and I remember seeing at my mum's 70th birthday, I was DJing for them. And I took it very seriously, could you imagine? And so, when I played the Beatles, seeing mum and her friends scream along with Twist and Shout, this weird kind of like flashback through time of Beatlemania. You know what I mean? Like original Beatlemaniacs doing it here. You know what I mean? That's what Phonogram is about for me. As in, Phonogram is about like how culture impacts us across time and space, rather than being about youth. That's my problem. It's like I flirted earlier that people misunderstanding Phonogram early on, and that's about the preconceptions and prejudices people have about pop culture, which is fine, but they're there. And I never thought that was the most innocent thing about that first volume. As in, I never thought I had to explain that, you know, being snobbish about music isn't cool. You know, you know what I mean? Like, it's very rare I say I'm naive, but I was definitely naive then. So anyway, Die. So I was trying to write something that was shorter, with like more complicated characters, older, not using the same techniques, working with a very different artist. Like Stephanie, I wanted to work with for ages, like since the Journey to Mystery covers. And like you have to work completely differently to Jamie. I also wanted to be really heavily, the research ended up taking over. I've written this whole RPG hanging off the side of Die, so which is available to download. It's about 100,000 words at the moment, the beta. It's a genuinely stupid project. like I'm sure we're going to eventually do people play it and like it, actually. That's the good thing. So I'm sure eventually we'll like turn it into a Kickstarter or something, because it's genuinely people like it. But like, so that, you know what I mean? Like Die is this weird, hyper concentrated bit of nonsense which I'm obsessed by, and people go along with, you know what I mean? That was Die. And then the future.
I was gonna say,
it's like once the future crept up on me, because it's like I wasn't planning on that, you know what I mean? Like I was like, okay, Die's over here and I'm gonna think about other stuff, maybe a novel. And you, of course, you came with me with talking about Dan Mora, you know. It was similar. That sounds fun. And it was literally that sounds fun of it, because like I described Die as in how much hard work it is. And I don't understand like once the future is like easy, but at the same time, it's, you know what I mean, it's fun. You know what I mean? Like it's not me sitting down with 500 books and doing that. And this is actually the best thing about comics for me. Not the best thing, one of the best things. The best thing is getting new art. Is you get to change. You're not like stuck with a novel for a year. It's like you get to like change. Like this week, I'm going to do this. I'm going to have Bridget shoot people in the face with a shotgun. I'm going to work out cool cutscenes. And next week, I'm going to talk about H.G. Wells' obsession about miniature toy soldiers. And then, you know what I mean? Like, you get to change up a lot. And when I'm picking projects, I'm always deliberately picking stuff which is different. You know what I mean? Like, I couldn't write 4 Wads and Futures. I couldn't write 4 Dies. I definitely couldn't write 4 Phonograms. So like that was like, oh yeah, I think part of the whole was, you know, I do these books of Marvel, those kind of fun. All my indie books are always very serious to some. Yeah, they're funny, but they're quite portentous. Like even Wictive, which the idea, why not do something that's fun, like Dr. Aphra? You know, something that's actually like people like, but do as a creator own book. You know, like do it like with a creator, you know, origin thing, and that's where Worlds of the Future came from, and it's worked incredibly well. Like, God,
I just had the stunning realization we've completely overlooked to talk to Aphra, and I feel terrible. Sorry.
No, we haven't talked about Star Wars. I mean, I've been doing this forever, and I've talked mainly about fanzines. The thing is, people, I tell you, I'm pretty aware that people who are listening, especially if you've listened this far,
Yes.
like they've heard me talk about many stuff before. If you're interested in me for like an hour, you know, you probably have heard me talk about almost all this stuff before.
Right.
But yeah, what's the future? I did Ludocrats, which is an idea from 2003. I wrote the first issue in 2007.
Wow. That's staggering.
I wrote the second issue in 2007 because I wrote that first as a demo issue.
Wow.
And that was being developed alongside like Phonogram 2 and just kind of fell by the wayside.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So that came out, we got that out, which was, and that was absolutely me having fun with my friends. Like that was always, it was meant to be a giggle, and it was. Obviously I'm back at Marvel. I'm doing like, I've just.
Oh, right. You've got the Eternals. Right.
Yeah. I'm with Essad. So it's like, there was the case of like what job, you know, sort of about jobs I haven't done before.
Yep.
Like previously at Marvel, I've done the useful supporting actor roles, like really big books and powerful characters, but like not always setting the rhythm. You know, like you hear the beat and I'm following it.
Yep.
Whilst Eternals, they get a chance to ground up, build something.
Yep.
You know, as in, let's look at the Eternals. Why do they work? Why don't they work? How can we improve them? And sitting and doing that, and it kind of almost, and also bringing the skill. You know, like the thing about Wicked that struck me at the time is how much I learned from Marvel and applied to Wicked and took it further. Like the what I could do with scale and like the page, you know, the page breaks and Wicked, how we did cheat pages, like we divided a 6-panel grid, make half the panels black, split that over 2 pages. You basically got 2 pages of content for 1 page of art. Therefore, we could spread it, you know, like. But I invented that stuff at Marvel because I was trying to find ways to make my comic, because they cut from 22 pages to 20 pages.
Right.
And my books were some of the first to be cut.
Wow.
Not personally, but just because the way it was sliding out.
Yep.
So at that stage, I was always looking for ways to pad the content without costing money. So if you look at my books at the time, especially Journey into Mystery, there's all kind of bits where I go black page, or okay, use the same page twice and re-letter it, or you know, like that's
so smart.
Formless tricks, the magic, if you will.
Yep.
So all that went to the Wick Diff, and those sort of ideas got pushed further. Like that issue of Wick Diff where we issue 14, where we remixed the entire we mixed the previous 13 issues and turned it into a whole new comic. We just recolor it. And of course it's a DJ, so it's a remix issue, and that's based upon some stuff we did in those stuff, but more so. And in some ways, something like Eternals is like me taking that skill set from Die and Wick Div and the big scale integrated world building stuff and applying it to a Marvel book, like as much as you can in the boundaries. I mean, I've done stuff like, I mean, spot like what I've learned, what I enjoy is the scale of things. Like I've done things like I've named all the Eternals. Like the Eternals' origin is there were 100 Eternals. They came to, like Celestials arrived on Earth. They made 100 Eternals. They made 100 deviants. They left. And what I've done is like I've taken like the 60 already existing deviants. I've looked up all their names, and then I'll work out the rest.
Wow.
And I've arranged them into political groups, and you know, and my idea is the Eternals are eternal, so there's only ever these 100. So like it's the whole Game of Thrones family tree thing.
Yeah, I was about to say it's Old Testament.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
I think there's a lot of that in Kirby, but it's also at the same time is it's skirmish rules from Warhammer.
Yes.
Right?
Do you want to take it like even? I'm at home with a systemic game in this. I mean, the deviants breed. I've done a thing for issue 3 that I've programmed a deviant name generator. Like, and I've
that's amazing. That's I couldn't love you more, but I love you more now. I just, of course, that's incredible.
Yeah. So what I do is I went through every single deviant name I could find in canon, and broke them into their phonemes. Is that the right word? Yeah. And then randomly assembled them according to formulas, different formulas, and occasionally, and then make sure there's no repeats. And you run it, and it generates 1,000 names, including ones with titles and stuff like that.
Oh, that's brilliant!
And that's going to be.
You and I sometime need to get into the. I have a theory about the Eternals, and the sort of the mythic structure. And then we'll get into my theories of mythic structure on Tolkien with the Lord of the Rings. With Lord of the Rings specifically, not really the Hobbit as much. But
we said earlier about the Tolkien. My theory about Tolkien now is, not one of them anyway, is like the cruel way of describing Tolkien is Lord of the Rings exists as a reason for Tolkien to have his fanfic languages. You know, Tolkien really cared about the languages, and he believed that languages came from places. So in other words, you have to have a place to have a language.
Yep.
Hence, that's why Middle Earth exists. And for me, that's how I end up thinking about the Die RPG. As in, the Die RPG is a way for me to think about die. As in, since what a game mechanic does is actually mechanics like a physics system.
Yep.
So by making a game system and thinking about the existence of the world, so I've got the die system over here and the story here, and die itself, as in whatever the magical die idea is, it lives in a hologram up here somewhere, which in need of a place. That. And of course, the kind of the Tolkien skill set, that's what I'm kind of trying to apply to stuff like Eternals. The idea of how can I turn this into a mythology? So I've sort of taken all the stuff in Marvel's comics and, okay, with a few tweaks, how can we make this a rise and fall and all these different stories people have made, turn into a genuine, compelling history of like these people having heresies and schisms and like, you know what I mean?
Well, it's you're making the Silmarillion.
Yeah, absolutely. But like,
and the way the Silmarillion was originally made, which was a bunch of notes that nobody's ever going to see, right? You know, that maybe it'll get published later.
A mate of mine, Gareth Hanrahan, has just done he's going through all the histories of Middle Earth, all the different drafts, and he's doing basically his quick notes. And like, I know quite a lot of it, not as much as he does, because I've never read the actual histories, but like, these are great threads, because it's stuff like, you know, how long Aragorn was originally trotted the Hobbit, because, you know, he was originally up to a certain point, like he was a hard man hobbit, and so much of the descriptions haven't changed. So it's like, and it's funny how just by changing a few of them, you change the image from this hobbit who'll knife you to there's so much good stuff.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I want to be mindful of your time, so we've run right up to the demarcated limit. And so, dude, I just can't thank you enough for your tremendous generosity and kindness. And I can't wait to get yelled at by Matt Gagnon that we really didn't talk much about Once and Future. But I think that's the fun of these conversations, which is just to get into the creative process and sort of your progression as a creative person and how you see the world. And you have been open-hearted and completely generous with that. And I hope that the conversation inspires somebody or demythologizes the process a bit to make it a bit more accessible, and that the next Kieron Gillen is listening and will take encouragement and become heartened about what could be. So thank you, brother.
My pleasure. The next Kieron Gillen has to kill this Kieron Gillen, skin this Kieron Gillen, wear them as a battle suit. That's how we breed the Kieron Gillen people.
I think your Warhammer is showing, my friend. I think your Warhammer is showing.
Yeah, well, I'm always showing my Warhammer. This has been a lot of fun, Ross. I'll speak to you later, yeah?
Thank you. You got it.
See you soon.
Bye-bye.
So how great was that? I love Kieron so much. He is so well spoken, funny, charming, articulate, brilliant, has tons of insights. I hope you got a lot out of it. I'd really encourage you to hit like on this video if you enjoyed it. If you want to see more, that's a great way to encourage me to do more. And give me a comment if you want to say something. I'd love to hear your insights, hear what you liked, what you didn't like. And don't forget to hit subscribe. And when you do, hit the bell to make sure that you get notified when I upload more videos. I've got some great guests coming up, and we've got some great stuff coming for you. So make sure that you check it out, get some new insights, learn some new things about making comics, writing comics, creating comics, publishing comics, all sorts of fun stuff from some of your favorite creators. So thanks again, and thank you so much.